Hey, how's it going? It's Dan from modular.dev, and today we're going to talk about using JavaScript in Blazor. Um, I apologize in advance if you were trying to come to our stream yesterday. We had some technical difficulties, but we got them fixed, and we're good to go. So, um, yeah, today we're going to talk about JavaScript in Blazor and how you can use it, and how you can call JavaScript from Blazor and vice versa, and how you can use JavaScript modules to import things dynamically as well. So let's just jump into it, and as always, feel free to ask questions on the stream or afterwards, and don't forget to like and subscribe as well. So we're going to start with the very standard Blazor app here. We got the the same one that everybody always sees when they start Blazor, and we're going to go ahead and modify this a bit. So here is the counter code, and let's just go ahead and do what we might think is natural when we're writing HTML, and that's just putting a script tag in here. Let's go ahead and put source, and I made a counter.js file right before here. I don't know why it puts that little squiggly in there, but we'll get rid of that. And the first thing you'll notice is that we can't do this. We actually have an error. It says script tags should not be placed inside components because they cannot be updated dynamically. And this is kind of a fundamental thing that you should know when you're developing Blazor components. So let's go ahead and go to this link that they're recommending we go to so we can kind of figure out what they're talking about here. And I happen to have it right here. This link talks about adding a compiler error if there's a script element inside of a component. And Steve Sanderson is kind of the mastermind behind Blazor. I mean, there's a lot of people, but he's one of the big ones. And he kind of talks about why you would not want to have a script tag inside of a component. And the main reason that is because a component is going to get re-rendered. And if your script tag gets rendered again, well, now you have two instances of that JavaScript, which could cause some problems. Not only that, but if a C# variable changes state or something like that, and you're using that C# variable in your JavaScript, things can get messy pretty quick. So his recommendation is to put the script tags into the Index.html, and that will be fine. So that's good. We can go ahead and put this script tag into the Index.html. Now, I did want to say, though, that you may want to do this for some reason, and I've had it where I've wanted to do it before, because maybe you're just using a regular ASP.NET Core application. You're not using Blazor necessarily, but you're using Razor components because they're nice and flexible and all that. So that's something that you may want to do. In that case, you definitely have the option to put this as normal, but you just kind of got to override this error. And he recommends putting suppress error BL9992 there. So if we put that, that will get rid of the error, and we'll be able to load that script. So that's something you can do. Again, be careful with that though. Make sure you read this GitHub issue. Make sure you understand why he's saying what he's saying. And if you still have a good reason to do this, you can do it. But for the sake of this demonstration, that's the last I'm going to say about putting a script tag inside of your component. Okay, so let's say we put it inside the index.html. Okay, and in this JavaScript file, I'm going to go ahead and just do a simple alert hello world, just so we can see that it's working. Okay, let's go ahead and run it. Okay, I actually did not see it. Let's see. I did not see it pop up. Are we loading that correctly? I don't know why that would make a difference, but let's try this again. Huh. Okay, well, that should have worked. Let's see. Oh, well, I'm not quite sure why not, but that's fine. Let's just see if we can figure it out real quick. Script source counter.js. Let's go ahead and get into our code here. Maybe there's a console error. No, I don't see it. Maybe let's just refresh this. Maybe something's cached. Okay, something was cached. All right, there it is. Hello world. All right, so that's that. We can pull it JavaScript in that way, and that's great. But a lot of times your JavaScript files are very large, and maybe you don't want to pull it in index.html. In that case, they actually came out with a way to do that with release candidate 1. At least I think it came out then. Let's go ahead and look at it. This is JavaScript Isolation and Object References. So I linked this documentation as well in here. And if we scroll down to the JavaScript portion, you'll see that we can now import modules, JavaScript modules using the JS object reference, which will give us a reference to that, and we'll be able to call something with it. So that's an option. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'll delete the counter.js from the index.html, and let's go back into the counter.razor. Now I kind of had some code down here because I knew I was going to use it. Let's go ahead and put it in. So I'm going to import this JavaScript when I am rendering. So I'm going to override the protected override async task on after render async bool first time. Okay. And I'm going to import, I'm not going to import this though, I'm going to import counter.js. Okay. Oh, and before I do that, I didn't even mention, whenever you're working with JavaScript in Blazor, you're going to want to inject IJS runtime and call it JS runtime. Okay. So now we have a reference to the JS runtime, and now we can invoke things from it. And I gotta make a variable for this, or a property for this. And we're going to store a reference to this counter module into JS object reference. And now, after we load that, we can call that module and call some function from that module. So if you're not familiar with JavaScript modules, they're very similar to JavaScript files, with the exception of you're going to be exporting certain functions. So if I want to export a function and I want to call it show prompt, maybe I can do prompt give me your name, and you can call this function anytime you want. So imagine this was a very long JavaScript file. You don't want to load that necessarily on the index.html right when the page loads, but instead you want to load it when you actually go to the counter component. And this is how you can do that. So you're importing that file, and now you can call any method within that file. So let's go ahead and try that and make sure this works. Okay, let me let me explain this real quick. So invoke void async. The first parameter here is going to be the name of the function. In this case, it's show prompt, and that is what we want. With any additional parameters, maybe I put a message here. You can pass those in as parameters to your function. So maybe I have a message, and maybe instead of prompting give me your name, I put the variable message here. So that's how invoke void async works. You can also use invoke async if you are expecting to return something from the function, but we're not going to do that with this. We'll do that later. And you can put as many parameters as you want. You just kind of keep putting them in here. And for every parameter, you need to just put something in here. But let's go ahead and remove that. So right now, if everything works, we should be importing counter.js. We should be showing a prompt with the word message, because that's what our JavaScript function has in it. So again, this is using the module approach. Let's go ahead and run this. And again, it worked. So we have message, and you can put in whatever you want and hit OK. And that's awesome. That's one way to import JavaScript. So feel free to use that. I also wanted to touch on how you can call back into .NET from JavaScript. So basically, what you can do is trying to remember the syntax for it. Let me see. .NET object reference, that's what it is. So you're going to create a .NET object reference, and you're going to pass that in as a parameter to your function. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to simulate this. Oh wait, no, it's a static class. Create. Okay, you don't do new .NET object reference. You do .NET object reference.create. Okay, so that's going to pass this in as a reference, and what this is going to do is it's going to pass a reference to this component, and then we can do something with this component. So perhaps what I want to do is I want to maybe I want to simulate this increment count that's kind of standard with this counter component, but instead of calling it in Blazor, I want to call it from JavaScript. So I'm just going to remove the Blazor onClick event, and what I want to do is create an onClick event in JavaScript for this button. And again, you can have as many of these components as you want, so we got to be careful that it works for the correct one. So let's go ahead, and we need to pass two things to this method. One is the actual element reference, and one is the .NET object that will be calling back to when the element is clicked. So hopefully that's clear. So what we need to do is we need to create a @ref, and @ref basically just means element reference. So we're going to create a reference to this button, and I actually have to make that variable down here. Element reference, button reference, and we can pass that in right there. Okay. Next thing we'll do is we'll pass that in as a parameter, and this doesn't make sense to call show prompt anymore. Let's call this wire up events, because we're going to wire up this click event on this button. So now in the counter module, we're going to, instead of taking in a message, we're going to take in an element and a .NET reference, because those were the two parameters we were passing. The first one was the element reference to the button, and the second one was the .NET object reference to this entire component. That's what those two things are. All right, so in the counter, we're going to go ahead and do element.add event listener. I'm not getting IntelliSense because it doesn't know what element is, but now that I'm in here, it will. And we'll do click, and let's create a function to execute when that click event happens. Okay, so we're going to do .NET reference dot, and then we basically need to call the C# function. And trying to remember here, this is it. Invoke method async. That's the name of it. So invoke method async, and then we're going to call increment count because that was the name of the function in the component. So let's trace this through one more time, and then I'll kind of move on. We're importing this module. Then we're going to wire up the events. We're going to pass in the button reference and a reference to this entire component. Then in the module, we have an event listener. So when we click that button, we're going to call back into that component, and we're going to call the increment count method. And that should work. The only thing we have to do is make this increment count JS invocable, which means invocable from JavaScript. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to find it. Also, a side note, it needs to be... Let's see if it works. And it looks like it is... it's incrementing very quickly. So we have some kind of an issue here. Let's see. Oh! Each time this renders, we are wiring up an event, which is you're gonna get that click event handled many, many times. We only want to do this if it's the first time. All right, let's try that again. There we go. So we're kind of doing the same thing as what we were doing in Blazor, but we're doing it through JavaScript. And now you may be wondering, why is that important? Obviously, it would be easier to do it through Blazor, and I completely agree. However, there's some things that you can't do in Blazor, at least not yet. Maybe you want to open up a dialog that allows you to capture audio and video or something like that. Or maybe you want to use the native file system API that's only available in JavaScript. Those types of things, you're going to have to invoke a JavaScript method, and then you may want to come back and do something with the original component. So that's how you can do it. Now let's go ahead and add multiple counters to the index page and see if it actually works. I actually don't know if it will work. Let's go ahead and try it. If each one of those will be handled separately. They should. Yep, okay, so everything still works as promised. The interesting thing to note, though, if we look in the tab here, is that we probably couldn't tell, but we're only downloading this counter.js file once, and that's just kind of the way modules work. When you import them, it knows whether or not that module has been imported or not. This is contrary to a normal JavaScript file that you just put in with a script tag. If you put in multiple script tags, it's going to get imported multiple times. So that is definitely an advantage of modules, because modules are kind of intended to be stateless, right? Okay, cool. What else did I want to cover with JavaScript? We covered importing them with modules, and we covered importing them in Index.html. Oh yeah, okay. I want to talk about a little bit about a class library. And again, this is something that is new with .NET 5 preview, or the release candidate 1 preview. This is JavaScript Isolation. So I did a whole video on .NET 5 release candidate 1, so you can check that out for more information. But let's just go over JavaScript Isolation just a little bit. And some of the knowledge that we've already learned about importing modules, we can use with a class library, or a Razor component library, basically. So what I've done is I've created a library project down here, and really all it has is a component that imports some kind of a module, and then it calls show prompt on it. And that show prompt gets called anytime you've clicked this button. So let's just import this component into the index, the home page, and I'll show you how it works, and then we'll explain why it works. So let's go to index, and we'll go to library.component1. So I could also, add a using for that namespace. Oh, and but before I move on, if you do have a project, you need to add that reference as a project reference, or if it's a NuGet package, you'd have to pull it in using manage NuGet packages. But either way, in this case, I just had a project, a local project, so I just brought it in, and that's where you see here. So now I can pull in any of those components. Hey, Coding Cyan, nice to see you again. All right, and then looks like we're bringing in this component. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, this is the component that you would get from the project that I made, and you'll see we can click show prompt and we can get anything here. And the interesting thing about this is the main project, this JavaScript demo.client, didn't need to put anything in the Index.html to know what JavaScript to pull. It didn't need to do anything. It just needed to pull in that component. And the reason why it works is kind of described in the this documentation. And basically, this a file gets auto-generated at this ww root, and it gets put in the underscore content my components, whereas my components is the library name, and then the name of the JavaScript file. So if you notice here, if I go back to my component, we are importing, using that import again, underscore content / library, because that's the name of this particular namespace or assembly, and then the name of the JavaScript file. So this JavaScript file is pretty simple. It just exports a simple show prompt. But using that same technique that we used to import JavaScript files as modules, we can do that here. Just keep in mind the naming convention. So it's underscore content / name of the assembly, and then whatever JavaScript files you want. And that's really all there is to it as far as importing JavaScript from inside of a class library. So now this class or this component is self-contained. It doesn't need to worry about whether or not the project that it pulls into is going to pull it in that JavaScript file or not in the script tag. It doesn't really care. It's going to import that file no matter what, which is great. One other thing I just wanted to briefly mention, and then I think that's probably about it for today, is what do you do with this import thing if you want to not carry around this reference everywhere? Let's just put it that way. Maybe you want to import a JavaScript file and have all of the functions available to you at any point without having this reference. And this is something that I did in my other application, and I kind of created this function called import.js, and I'll kind of go over it in just right here. So this file or this function is going to get imported right when you load it, or right when you load the JavaScript file. And basically what it does is it sets up variables in the window to put files into, basically put modules into. So if I go back in here, and if I go back to my counter component, instead of having this JavaScript object reference everywhere, we could delete this, and we could just do JS runtime.invoke async, invoke void async. I guess we're not really returning anything here, and import JS, because that's the name of this particular function. And I think I'll put this on GitHub in case anybody wants to use it, but let's go ahead and just kind of see what it does. So the first thing you do is you pass in the file, and that's going to be counter.js, and you give it a variable name that you want to reference later. So we'll just put counter. So at any point now I can reference, I'll just do a wait on that. So at any point now I can do counter.js .wireup events. And that's just going to be using the JS runtime. No, that's not quite right. I put all mine inside of a modular dev variable. You wouldn't have to do that, but that's what I do. So modular dev.counter.wireup events. Now I can call this method from anywhere, but you do have to make sure you imported it first, otherwise it's not going to work very well. So let's go ahead and try this, make sure it still works. Yeah, that still works. So it's doing the same type of thing, right? You're importing this module, and I'm just saving it into a variable in the window that I can reference later. And whatever way you like doing it, maybe is better for you. But I find this one is better. That way I don't have to keep carrying around object references to the module everywhere I go. So I think that's about it. The only other thing I wanted to just briefly talk about, I don't have anything to show about this, is, okay, what do you do about external third-party libraries? So if you wanted to bring in a JavaScript map from Mapbox or Google, or if you wanted to bring in some payment thing from Stripe or Braintree or something like that, how could you do that in Blazor? And you kind of have to do it in the same type of way as what we were talking about here. So if they offer modules, great, just import it as a module using either method that we talked about, and you can use the functions available to you there. That would be the ideal situation, although not a lot of them are like that yet. So unfortunately, what you'll probably have to do is just put that file in your index.html and then load it here, and then you'll be able to work with it throughout your application. So I personally don't like putting too much stuff in the index.html because then there's a lot of things being loaded right away. I like doing the module approach, but you know, maybe that's not a big deal for you. Maybe your app can handle that because people are expecting a little bit of a load time. So yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to cover today. We went over a lot, so if you have any questions, definitely reach back out and I'll try to get them answered. All right, thanks.